Hello everybody and welcome to week number 9 of the 2017 college football predictions here on my channel. Last week we had 5 games and we ended up going 3-2 overall and 2-3 against the spread. So we'll just jump into those real quick. The first game from last week was my lock of the week, and I went with an underdog for the first time in my lock of the week, saying that they would cover this spread. There's no doubt about it, and it was only a 7-point spread, but it was Oklahoma State on the road against Texas. Oklahoma State was a 7-point favorite, number 10, taking on an unranked Texas. And I said that Oklahoma State would more than likely win, so I picked them to win, which they did, but I said there was no way Texas doesn't cover that 7-point spread, which they do, because they end up losing by 3. In overtime, they end up losing 13-10. Texas actually had the lead entering the fourth quarter, which Oklahoma State then ties at 10 early on in the fourth quarter. Nothing happens, but then in overtime, Oklahoma State gets a field goal to start overtime, and then on 3rd and 4 from the 6-yard line, Texas has an interception which ends the game, so they end up losing 13-10. But we got both the pick and the spread right, which brings us to the next game. It was number 20 UCF on the road against Navy. Navy was a 7-point underdog, and I picked Navy to win in my upset of the week, but that did not happen. UCF wins 31-21. But it was tied at 14 until 12 minutes to go in the third quarter when UCF took a 7-point lead, which they made 10. Navy cut it back to within 3 with under 13 minutes left in the game. But a touchdown with 3:30 to go put it away and put UCF up 31-21, which they held on to. So we got that pick and obviously spread wrong. Which brings us to number 19, Michigan at number 2, Penn State. I said Penn State would more than likely win, which they do. I picked Michigan to cover the 9.5-point spread, as did most people, because I believe I recorded that game, or that video on Thursday. And by Saturday game time, that spread was down to 7.5. So a lot of people put their money on Michigan, and for good reason. It's a really good defense. I don't think last week's game negates that. I think they just got worn down because the offense really couldn't do much as expected. And unfortunately, 2 quick scores really kind of helped Penn State out. It was only a 1-touchdown game entering the fourth quarter, but it ends up being pretty ugly. Penn State wins big. So we got the pick right in who would win, but we got the spread wrong on that one. Next game we got completely wrong. It was number 11 USC on the road against number 13 Notre Dame. Notre Dame was a 3.5-point favorite, but I picked USC to win outright because I just didn't buy into Notre Dame just yet. But for the first time this year, all right, I'm buying into Notre Dame. They win 49-14 against USC. USC did turn it over 3 times, though. 2 of them on fumbles, 1 on an interception, which obviously didn't help their cause, but I'm not sure it would have mattered. It was 28-0 at halftime and 42-14 at the end of the third quarter. So this game is pretty much all Notre Dame. Pretty impressive performance by them. So just got to give them credit. Got the pick wrong and obviously the spread. Which brings us to the last game of the week. It was Washington State, number 15, hosting Colorado. Washington State was a 10.5-point favorite. And I said Washington State would come out and, look for redemption for their loss that they had the week prior against Cal. And they do. They come out and they shut out the Buffaloes. They win 28-0. So not as many points as I expected for Washington State, but just as dominating of a win as I expected, as they easily covered the 10.5-point spread. So we got that pick right and that pick against the spread right. So as I mentioned, that put us at 3-2 for the weekend, which moves us to 44-21 overall in straight up predictions. We were 2-3 against the spread, which moves us to 32-35 overall against the spread. Hopefully we can start getting back on track with that one. We got the upset wrong, which puts us to 2-5 on upsets this year. But we got the lock right, which moves us to 5-3. So let's jump into this weekend. We got 6 games on tap. 4 of them being top 25 matchup. So a pretty good week in college football. First one in a few weeks, really, where we had multiple high-profile games going on. So the first game for this week coming up is number 11 Oklahoma State going on the road against number 22 West Virginia. Oklahoma State's a 7.5-point favorite. Oklahoma State's won 3 in a row. Obviously, as mentioned, a close win on the road against Texas. West Virginia's won their last 2, including a close win on the road against Baylor last week, which, I mean, Baylor's not good at all, so. But I like West Virginia. I picked them in the game against Texas Tech to win outright, and I believe I took them against TCU to cover a spread, which they did. So they're at home against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's a 7.5-point favorite. I like Oklahoma State to win, because I think that will more than likely happen, but I think West Virginia will cover the spread, if not win outright. I'm not picking them to win outright, but it wouldn't surprise me if they do at all. But I do like them to keep this game close, so I'm taking West Virginia to cover the 7.5 points in a loss to Oklahoma State. Then my next game is the lock of the week. It is Rutgers. Oh yeah, talking about Rutgers. They've won 2 in a row, both in the Big Ten. Look at that. Big road win against Illinois and a close home win against Purdue. Exciting. Anyway, they're on the road against Michigan. Michigan coming off of that loss against Penn State, which obviously didn't end very good. But like I said, it was only a 1-score game in the fourth quarter. I think the defense just got worn down. So Michigan's lost 2 out of their last 3. Again, the other loss being Michigan State, where they turned the ball over 5 times to nothing. I don't think they're turning the ball over 5 times to nothing against Rutgers. Even if they did, I don't know how Rutgers scores against Michigan's defense. Because Rutgers' offense is bad. Really bad. Yeah, they beat Purdue, but in that win against Purdue, they only won 14-12, and they only had 8 first downs in 217 yards of offense. They had 8 first downs against Purdue. So, if you're getting 8 first downs against Purdue, I don't even want to know what you're going to do against Michigan's defense, but it's not going to be good. So, I'm not even exaggerating when I say I don't know how Rutgers scores unless Michigan has to shit themselves to even have this game be close, which they've done a couple times this year. They haven't been the greatest team against weaker opponents. But anyway, at home, coming off of a tough loss, they want some redemption. They're going to be angry against Rutgers, who do have probably the worst offense in the Big Ten against what is, at the very least, a top 3 defense in the Big Ten, if you think Penn State and Ohio State's are better. So, 23.5, it would be embarrassing if Michigan won this game by any less than 4 touchdowns. Michigan should at least score 4 touchdowns, 28 points, and maybe Rutgers gets a field goal. But even that will cover this 23.5 point spread. That's why this is my lock of the week. Give me Michigan to cover the 23.5 against Rutgers. Then we have number 2, Penn State, on the road against number 6, Ohio State. Ohio State's a 6.5 point favorite, coming off of a bye week. Penn State, of course, coming off that win at home against Michigan. I think this is going to be a really even game. I think it's going to be back and forth, and I think it's going to come down to probably the final series. Penn State 7-0, Ohio State 6-1. I think the overall resume for both these teams isn't overly impressive still. I certainly don't think Penn State's the second best team in the country. I don't think Penn State beats Clemson on a neutral field. I don't think Penn State beats Georgia on a neutral field. Obviously, they don't beat Bama, but they're not ranked ahead of Bama. But yeah, I don't buy into Penn State being the second best team in the country, but I don't have a problem with it because they'll end up where they deserve to end up at the end of the year. Anyway, okay, so I think these teams are pretty even overall. So, you got to lean towards the home team. And then you also got to lean towards the fact that Urban Meyer is 20-0 after a bye week. So I'm going to go with Ohio State to win. But I'm going to go with Penn State to cover the 6.5 point spread because I think this game's going to be really close and it will come down to the last possession. Ohio State's biggest weakness is easily their secondary, and they've been lucky not to play a real quarterback the last few weeks. Last 6 games, they haven't played anybody. So now they're playing a pretty good quarterback. So that secondary might get beat up quite a bit. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Penn State wins just based off of that. But I think they'll be able to keep it close and all the way down to the last few moments of the game because of that. So that's why I'm going with Penn State to cover the 6.5, but I'll go with Ohio State to win. Then we got number 3, Georgia, on the road against Florida. Florida has lost 2 in a row against Texas A&M and LSU. LSU's looked like they got back on track, so maybe that's not a terrible loss. It was only by 1 point. And Florida's defense has still shown up and looked pretty good, but I don't know if they'll be good enough to keep Georgia's offense in check, who scores about 40 points a game, and then on top of that, be able to put up points with their offense. But the one thing that has me cautious about this game is it's the SEC, which has proven to be incredibly mediocre outside of a couple teams, and you really don't know what's going to happen on a week-to-week basis. Plus, the last few years of football has shown me that Georgia will almost always lose a game like this. Now, you got to give them credit because they've gone 7 games without doing that, so they've gone a lot further than they have the last few years before choking. But it's just always in the back of my mind, like, Georgia's going to choke. Georgia's going to choke. So for this game, Georgia's a 14-point favorite on the road against Florida. I'm going to go with Georgia to win, because they should. But I'm going to go with Florida to cover the 14. I think their defense is pretty good, and I think at home, I think they hang in this game for a while. I think they probably end up losing by, if not, just a touchdown or something, probably 10 points, 13, whatever. But I'm going to go with Florida to cover the 14 points in a loss to Georgia. Which brings us to our second Big 12 matchup of the week and our second top 25 matchup in the Big 12. It is number 4 TCU going on the road against number 25. That's right, number 25 Iowa State. TCU is a 6.5 point favorite. Iowa State coming off of 3 straight wins. Of course, that big one being on the road against Oklahoma. And then they destroyed Kansas 45-0 and beat up Texas Tech on the road 31-13. So Iowa State, really good 3 straight games for them. TCU, on the other hand, they've been taking care of business. They beat Kansas 43-0 last week. Won on the road against Kansas State 26-6 and beat West Virginia in a close one 31-24 3 weeks ago. So TCU, 6.5 point favorite on the road against Iowa State. I guess this would probably be a good time to tell you that this is my upset of the week. That's right, I got Iowa State winning this game at home against TCU and pretty much ending the Big 12's hopes of a playoff team, barring some other stuff happening around the country. But if Iowa State wins this game, it'll be tough to get a playoff team out of the Big 12. Which brings us to our final game of the weekend. It is number 14 NC State on the road against number 9 Notre Dame. NC State was supposed to be a pretty good team this year. They were a dark horse on a lot of people's list entering the season, but then they lost their home opener against South Carolina, who's really is not a good team and weren't supposed to be a good team. So that gave a lot of people pause, but they've bounced back with 6 straight wins, including on the road against Pitt easily, against Louisville pretty easily, and on the road against Florida State. Obviously, Florida State not the team they were the last couple of years, but still, on the road against Florida State, that's a nice win. So now they're going into Notre Dame, who started off rocky, as always. They had that early loss at home to Georgia, but they've really taken care of business against everybody else. Impressively so, too. So, at home, Notre Dame, NC State. I think you gotta like Notre Dame in this game. So I'm going with Notre Dame to win. They're a 7-point favorite. I'm going to go with NC State to cover, though. I think this will be a close game. I think NC State shows up ready to play. I think this game goes down to the wire. So give me Notre Dame to win, NC State to cover. That will do it for this week. Thank you for watching, everybody. As always, be sure to subscribe for next week's episode where we break down these 6 games and predict all the interesting games for next week. And as always, be sure to comment below your thoughts on my predictions and any of your predictions for any of these games or any other game going on around the country. I'll be sure to let you know what I think. And thank you guys so much for watching once again, and goodbye. In a loss to Georgia. Which brings us to our second